G'day guys, and welcome to another Blender Guru tutorial. This time we're going to be tackling the world. Now this is something that quite a few of you have been requesting for many years, and when I say many I mean 2 years, because that's how long my site has been around. If I'm being entirely honest, I've actually been putting off this tutorial because I'm not sure if you know or not, but I'm actually working on a new training product called the Nature Academy, and I was going to actually include this tutorial as part of that product, but it wasn't until very recently that I decided that I would separate them and that I can basically give this one to you guys for free. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this tutorial, showing you how to create the world, all using 100% Blender. So this is the finished result that you can see right here, obviously. I'll just show you briefly what the scene is made up of before getting into the tutorial. So the world is actually made up of 3 spheres. So in 100 years or so, I'm sure they'll, look back and say, Christopher Columbus discovered that the world was round, and then it was Andrew Price who discovered that there was 3 spheres. So there's actually the ground, and then there is the cloud, kind of cloud sphere, and then there is the atmosphere. Yeah, see what I did there? So those 3 compiled together then produces this nice realistic result. So there's going to be a lot to do with texturing, so adding color maps, bump maps, then specularity masks, and then on top of that we're also going to be getting into material nodes, which is something that I don't think a lot or enough Blender users use. It's probably one of the most underrated features of Blender. It's really cool once you understand how to use it, why you should be using it, and the things you can do with it. We're going to be using it in this tutorial to create this effect where when the light falls off from the earth, you can see, that it fades into the kind of the city lights for the world. So that's a really cool effect, and it's made possible using material nodes. And on top of that, we're also going to get into compositing, so adding some glow. We're also going to be creating stars and a couple of other things like that. So without further ado, let's get cracking. So go ahead now and open up a new scene in Blender. And as you can probably guess, we're creating the world. So what kind of shape do you reckon we need to add? It's the UV sphere. Big surprise. So we want to, first of all, increase the number of segments for the sphere just to give it a more smoother appearance. So I'm going to change it to 64 segments and also 32 rings. So just sort of double the amount of smoothness for the shape. And we're also going to enable smooth shading in the settings there. Okay, so now I'm going to position the camera front on to the world. So the easiest way to do that, select the camera, go to front view mode, and then hit Control Alt number pad 0. And I also want to make it look as though the photo was taken from a faraway distance, kind of like a space shuttle looking back at the Earth. So going into the camera settings here, I'm going to increase this amount here to 60, and that kind of zooms in the camera view. You can also animate that, by the way. If you hit the I key, that'll put a keyframe there, so you can kind of animate zooming in and out of the camera, in and out of the scene, which is how I created my animation. But anyway, once you've positioned that, next thing we're going to do is get into the lighting. So really easy. Just take the default lamp, change it to sun, and then we're going to make the energy value 1.3. So just slightly brighter than the standard lighting. And I'm also going to rotate it to about there, so it's kind of pointing against the front part. And I'm just going to tilt it up a little bit as well. Okay, so something like that should be fine. Let's give that a render. I think there's probably too much lighting on it. So I want it to be kind of just the left side of it, the earth is in darkness. So something like that should be fine. And whilst I'm at it, I'm also going to make the background a solid black color now as well. So let's do that. And there you go. Cool. Awesome. So let's go ahead and save it now if you haven't already, in case it crashes. Not that it would. I'm just saying, if Blender does crash, that's it's always good to have that set and done. So going into the materials now, very important. First thing we're going to do is we're going to change the diffuse shading. Okay, normally I never change this, mainly because I really don't understand what all these settings do and how it's kind of different to the standard one. Normally we just leave it as Lampert. However, I was doing another tutorial from somebody else that was done in 2008, and he mentioned the miniature shader, and I gave it a little bit of an experiment, and I found that it actually works pretty good in this scenario because the miniature shader kind of gives kind of like even shading on kind of like the edges of the model, and I found it just produces a kind of more realistic result than the Lambert one in this scenario. And we're also going to turn the darkness down to around about 0.3, sorry. And you wouldn't think it, but the lower you set the darkness, then the brighter the Earth actually becomes. So that's something there for you. Okay, I'm going to make this material. Let's call this, let's call it Earth Day. Now that's not popularizing on that calendar event. That's because we're also going to be adding another material later, which is going to be the nighttime Earth, which is going to have the night lights in it. So that's Earth Day. There you go. All right, so now let's get into the textures. Add a new texture, make it image, and the texture that I'm going to use, or all of these textures actually come from NASA. Big surprise, like you would have got them anywhere else, really. But yeah, these textures are all available publicly on the NASA website. I'll put a link there so you can check them out. Excuse me, I just got to get a drink. Yeah, so they're all available on the NASA site. These ones here that I'm using are edited versions of the ones that they provide for you. The ones they give you are kind of really, really large and high detailed images, and they're really, really huge as well often, and it crashes Blender if you try to load them in sometimes. So I've actually just taken them into Photoshop and then shrink them down and saved them as JPEGs and things like that just to lower the size. Anyway, I'll put links there to the original ones and also my versions here so you can download them. Yeah, okay, so the one I'm using here is Color Map, so I'm just going to open that. Okay, really, really, you can see the size of it there, 10,000 by 5,400 or something, and I think that's half the size that it originally was, so really, really big images. The only thing you need to change is underneath the mapping options, change it from flat to sphere. Okay, now if you go ahead and render that now, you can see that the texture has been perfectly applied. No need for UV unwrapping, nothing fancy, just change that to sphere and it will work perfectly. The only thing that's wrong here is that it's just focusing on the ocean, and that doesn't look very cool at all. So I'm going to rotate the Earth, as you do, by about 215 degrees, something like that. Focusing on the Africa continent. Okay, so something like that's pretty good. I find this kind of area here, you've got a nice bit of green, a bit of like reddy orange with the nice blue, and it kind of gives a cool looking result. So I kind of like this area here. And it also, parts of it are going to be in the darkness, so there's going to be the night light shining through as well. So that's going to be cool as well. But yeah, you're welcome to focus on whatever country or continent you like. I was tempted to make it focus on Australia, but there was too many clouds in the way, so I couldn't do it. But there you go. Alright, so now I've got that set up. I'm going to change the name of it to Col, which is short for color. Okay, and I'm now going to add a second texture, and this one is going to be Bump. Okay, select image again. This is, of course, again, one from NASA. And this is basically a grayscaled image of basically all the terrain in the world, kind of like the high points. It's a height map, basically. So that's it's a really, really cool texture to have. Again, change the mapping to sphere. And then under the influence, uncheck color and then check geometry. And we need to change it to negative, minus 0.3, 0.2, something like that should be fine. Also make the bump mapping best quality. That just makes it, slightly newer, sharper looking bump mapping as well. And let's give that a render now. And you can see we've now got some bump mapping where there's the where there's the terrain basically. So already it's looking pretty cool. One thing you'll note is that there is specularity shining off the ground, which, in real life that wouldn't happen because the sun shines off the surface of the ocean, but you wouldn't really see it shining off, the desert or the forest or something like that. So we need to fix that. what we're going to do is we're going to add what's called a specularity mask. Okay, so go to image, go to open, textures, and we're going to select spec mask. Now this is just basically a black and white image of all the countries and the ocean together. So really, really good and perfect for what we want. Now before you do this, when you create a texture which is going to be affecting the specularity of a model, you need to go to the material settings and basically just turn off specularity for the material, because basically we now want to hand the control over for specularity to this image here. We don't want this one interfering, so we only want it to use this one right here. So we need to uncheck the color. We need to check RGB to intensity, and that's basically so it converts it from an RGB image to a black and white image. Very important. We're going to check negative so that it basically inverts it so that the ocean becomes white, because that's the part we want specularity to be a part of. And then we need to check specularity, set that specularity intensity like that. And of course, make sure you change the mapping to sphere as well, and you should see this right here. And now this value here has basically become this value. So instead of now, if you wanted to turn down the specularity of that, you wouldn't do it here. You just go here in the texture panel and just turn that down right there, and you can see it's now affecting the specularity. So I think setting it around about a 0.5 should be pretty good. And now if we render that, you can see that the specularity is no longer affecting the ground. So that is perfect for what we want. Cool, awesome. Now we're going to get into some fancy stuff. All right, so I mentioned before we're going to get into material nodes, and now is the time. All right, so let's split this window right here, and let's make this node editor. Okay, now with this material here selected, you can see this little button there you've probably never pressed before that says use shader nodes. So click that, and you can see now our nodes are actually appearing here in the node editor. Now basically, the way this works is you can add however many materials you want here, just like in the compositor, and you can plug them all in together, and then whatever is plugged in here into the output is what becomes the material essentially. So what I'm going to do here is, with this material selected, because currently there's no material there, I'm just going to select the earth that we've currently got there. So if we were to render this right now, nothing would have changed. It's just the same material that we had before. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another material. Okay, let's just add this in here. And I'm now going to click new. Now this new material is actually now a physical material as well. It's the same as if you were to come here and then add a new material there. It's the exact same thing, okay? So I'm going to call this one night, or yeah, I'll just call it night, okay? All right. And I'm just going to use basically the same shading options that we did for the standard earth. So let's just set this to mini earth, 0.3. I'm going to make it no specularity. And in the texture panel, we're going to enable an image. And this one is, of course, the night lights. Okay, now this image is basically just kind of a purplish, bluish type color to it, and then wherever there's lights or cities in the world, they're all lit up with tiny little yellow dots. So really, really cool, and it makes a nice effect when you use it in the scene. So the only thing we need to do is change the mapping to sphere, and also go to the materials here. And also, just on that note, make sure that you're selecting the right material here, because basically, once you're using material nodes, it now uses whatever material that you've got selected here in the node editor, and you can see the name there changes as I change between the two. So all the settings there will change according to whichever material you've got selected. So make sure you've got the night one selected, and then we're just going to give it an emit material. An emit amount, sorry, to 0.5, because basically we're going to make it apply to the dark side of the moon, no, the earth, and so obviously there's going to be no lighting on that side, so we need to make sure it has an emit value. Okay, cool, awesome. So how you would combine these two materials is very similar to how you would do something in the compositor for combining two things. Is you would add a mix node. And currently, if you add this one here like this, add that in there, basically what this is going to do is it's going to create a blend of both of those materials. So if you set this to 1, then you would get 100% of the night material. And then if you set this to 0, then you would get 100% of the day material, if that makes sense. So what we can do here though is if we plug something into this factor amount, we can use kind of like a grayscale and to use it to determine which parts of it, which parts of our material need to be this one, and then which parts of our material need to be this one, if that makes sense. So basically we want to make it so, you know, this part up here is this 100% this material, and then as the light fades off, we want it to be 100% the night material. Okay, so how we're going to do that is we're going to add another material, okay, a third material, and this isn't going to show up in the render at all. This is only for use in the material nodes, okay. So I'm going to click new, and I'm going to call this the separator, okay, separator material. All right, I'm just going to turn off the specularity just so it doesn't interfere, and I'm going to turn ambient lighting all the way down, and I'm also just going to make this a solid white texture as well, just because sometimes it can cause a little bit of problems. I just want it to be 100% white, okay, like that. All right. Now, if you were to render just with that material, in fact, let's just do this, right? Just show you what it looks like. It's just a white sphere, basically. But what you can see is that this part up here is white, and then this part down here is black. But you can actually use that basic material there as kind of like a grayscale so that you can make this part, the white part, be the day material, and the black part is going to be used as the night material. So what we're going to do that is we're going to add a color ramp, okay? Just plug that in here, all right? And this is going to allow us to control just a little bit more detail as to what parts need to be black and which parts need to be white. And I'm going to plug this into the factor amount right there, okay? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click flip, okay? And then I'm going to move this end point all the way back a bit, okay? So something like that. And now if we hit render, you can see that we now have the result that we want. This area over here is now using the night material, and this over here, which is receiving light, is now using the day material. So you can see how powerful the material nodes are when you can completely kind of change the way Blender works and, you know, light different parts of a material according to, give different parts of an object different materials according to which parts of the light get it. So really, really cool. And just so in case you don't understand it, if I just remove that just so it makes the night one solid white, but let's just make that red, okay, just so you can see. That part there is now solid red. That part there is getting this material right here. So you can want, like, if you want more light to be kind of like blending in to the main material, like, you know, the night material, sorry, you want that to be blending into the rest of it. You could set that like that, and then if you plug that in, then you can see that the lights kind of turn on like way, way, way over into here even, like where the light is still hitting it. So you can kind of make it look like people are just being lazy and they're turning on their lights instead of opening the window or something, you know, because they've still got lighting. But yeah, generally you just want this somewhere near the front there, just like that, just so that it's just nicely blended in. Maybe that's a little bit too far, but yeah, something like that, and gives a nice looking result. Anyway, so that is basically our first sphere now done. Let's now get into the second one. So the second one is going to be our cloud sphere. Now the reason we're making a second sphere is that we want to actually have the clouds casting a shadow onto the ground basically. So that's why we need to make it a separate object. So with the sphere here selected, I'm going to duplicate it. And now I'm going to hit scale and then hold down shift whilst I'm doing it, and then just increase the size. You can also, if you press N, bring up this little transform widget here, and you can actually change these settings right here. So the default one, the main one, is just set as all as 1, and now I'm just making this 1.012 or whatever. But yeah, you can go ahead and change those details if you want to get finer into it. Okay, so I'm going to delete the material there. I'm going to give it a new material, and I'm going to make this clouds. All right. And I'm going to turn off the specularity, and I'm going to go to the texture panel, add a new texture, image, and now let's select clouds. Okay, so this is just black and white grayscale clouds. I don't know how they photographed this. It seems really complex. I couldn't imagine trying to do that, but anyway, they've done it. There you go. It's really cool. Now we want to make it so basically the black parts are completely transparent and the white parts are obviously solid transparent, so that you can have, you know, clouds appearing over the top of the ground. So I'm going to check alpha like that, and I'm going to check RGB to intensity, and that's so that it basically starts using the black and white parts. And I'm going to make the color solid white, and that's for the color of the clouds basically. Okay. Now going back to the material, I'm going to turn the transparency all the way down to 0. Okay, and you can see that now the black parts have become completely transparent, and the clouds are now, yeah, basically showing up as 100% alpha. We also need to turn on, in the mapping options, set that to sphere, and now you can see it, it's mapping correctly. So now if we give that a render, you can see we now have clouds over the Earth. However, there is a problem. You will notice that the Earth is now showing up in complete darkness, and you've now got just that, you know, that bluish nighttime material casting over everything. Can you guess why that is happening? It's a question I get asked a lot. People emailing me asking why something's suddenly showing up as black. It's to do with the material underneath, okay? Not to do with the transparent material, it's the one underneath. You need to make sure that with your earth material selected, you need to go down into the shadow options and you check receive transparent. That's so that it receives transparent shadows. And we're going to do the same for, make sure you do that for all of your materials here, because you've got 3. Receive transparent, and the nighttime one as well. And now if we render it, you can see it's now rendering as it should. So the clouds are now casting a shadow onto the Earth as they should, and everything is looking quite cool. Awesome. Time for our third and final sphere. Duplicate it once more, and then just increase the size a little bit again. Okay, that's the size of it that I've got there, 1.017 or something. It doesn't really matter. It's not that important. Give it a new material, and we're going to call this atmosphere. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn on transparency. And, well, basically the effect we want to give it is so that kind of in near the edges, like as the Earth kind of wraps around there, it kind of becomes more and more blue, kind of like a gradient effect. And that's just kind of like how the atmosphere works. Like as it builds up around there, it just looks more and more and more blue. So that's what we're trying to get here. So if we go here in the transparency options, if we set the Fresnel amount to about a 1.5, and then we just play around with this blend value, we can kind of make this, you know, something like this, like that. I'm going to turn off the specularity, and I'm going to give this a color which I think will be fitting. So something like a blue color like that. And now let's give that a render, and you can see it gives us this result here. It's currently a little bit too solid blue, as you might have guessed. So let's turn down the alpha to a 0.5. Render that again. And it's looking a little bit better. You will notice that the clouds are now showing up as black. And can you guess why that's happening? Yep, because the clouds are underneath, we now need the clouds to receive transparent shadows as well. And now it's looking a little bit better. Okay, cool. All right, just go back to the atmosphere. Might just turn that up a little bit. And the lower you set that blend to, the more blue is going to be showing near the center of the Earth. So it's kind of a balancing act. You want it to look realistic enough. You need to really look at some reference images. I'll put some below this tutorial if you want to check them out. And if you want like a, you know, being technically realistic and accurate, kind of the Earth kind of atmosphere is kind of like a more light blue color like this. I just don't really like the look of that. It looks kind of weird, or not that light, but you know, something like that. I actually kind of like the way it looks when it's kind of more bluey purple color. It just looks kind of cooler, like kind of fresher. Like, you know, people haven't been polluting the planet for years and years, so it looks kind of more new, like a newborn Earth. So I make it kind of blue like that. But you can make it whatever color you want. You can make it red. Awesome. I think that is pretty much it for as far as in this portion of Blender goes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add yeah, we'll add some stars now. Okay, so this is really easy. Just go to the world settings, click on stars, and by default, the stars that it'll give you are really huge. It's these ugly little things right here that look kind of more like snowflakes falling really close to the camera than stars. So let's make the size of those 0.1, and the minimum distance I'm going to set to 5. Okay, so if we render that. Okay, now the problem with this is that you'll get some stars that are really big and then some that are really small. The reason for that is that currently the minimum distance is set to 0, and the minimum distance is the distance from which stars can be placed closest to the camera. So if you set that as 0, it's just going to place it, however close to the camera it wants. So I want to set this to 180, okay? So really, really far away, and what that's going to do is it's going to ensure that you don't get those really big blotchy stars there. I never used to use the star feature in Blender because I could never figure out how to get rid of these big blotchy stars showing up until someone mentioned that you should use the minimum distance thing. So I use that now and it really helps. So thanks for whoever recommended that. So once you've done that though, you also need to select the camera and ensure that the clipping distance is set to 200, because you've set the minimum distance to 180, so it needs to be, clipping distance needs to be further away as well. So if you render this now, you should see tiny little stars in the background. Very, very cool. I might just make the separation about 4, just so there's a little bit closer together, and also color just ensures they are a little bit more variated in color, so you get some that are slightly blue, slightly red, or slightly green, and just gives it a little bit more variation to it as well. Awesome. Now, although I'm using the star feature here, for my final animation, I actually rendered the stars onto a plane and just stuck it in the background. And the reason for that is that if you use the star feature in Blender, whenever you move the camera, the stars sometimes flicker. I'm not sure if you can see it, if they're actually happening there. But it's a known feature of Blender when you do an animation with stars that the stars start flickering. It's kind of annoying, but yeah, like some people have come up with like ways around it by like, instead of using the star feature, you just create a UV sphere and then like randomize all the vertices and then it just use them as halos instead. And it's kind of really complicated methods. I just rendered it onto a plane, but just note, if you're using it for an animation, you might want to use a different method instead of using the stars, just so you know. Anyway, let's now get into the compositor. Okay, cool. Now, technically, the current result we've got here is actually pretty realistic as far as, if you were to take a real photo of the Earth. But we want to make it look a little bit cooler, okay? Sometimes realism is boring, so we're going to fake it by, we're going to cheat a little bit. And we're going to give some glow to our Earth here. So, the way we're going to do this is we're going to add, first of all, an RGB curves node. Drop this in here. And then let's add a viewer node right here. And I'm just going to reduce this down just so that you get a really small amount of the Earth showing up. So something like that. Okay, so most of the stars are removed there. So I'm trying to remove them anyway. Let's move it back a bit. Yeah, you don't really want the stars showing through, so I'm just trying to get rid of them as much as possible. Anyway, something like that is fine. And now if I plug this into a blur node, set to fast Gaussian, I'm going to use relative just so that it's not dependent on the resolution of the thing. Set that to 2, Y. Okay, actually I might have to, yeah, sometimes if you fiddle with these endpoints in the RGB node, it kind of messes with it. Anyway, that's looking pretty good. And we'll now add a mix node, set it to add, and then blend it in with the original scene, like so. And now the more glow that we want, we just turn that up, and then obviously the more glow comes through. I might set this to 5. Okay, and yeah, if you want more glow, you can set that to, ridiculous amounts, but I want it to be nice and subtle, so something like that. Something like that should be fine, I think. Okay, you might be wondering why I'm not using just the glare node with you know, and just setting it to fog glow, because you can change the threshold and you don't have to go through RGB nodes. You can do that, but I find it just doesn't give you enough control, so I like to use the blur nodes instead. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to create kind of a slight kind of atmospheric glow, just really subtle, just around the outside of the Earth there. And whoops, what have I done? I've deleted the render layer. Anyway, the way we're going to do that is I'm going to add another blur node, set it to fast Gaussian. And yeah, let's set this to 1. See how that looks, something like that. And now, if I add, what's it called, the alpha over node, drop this in here. I want that to be placed behind the Earth, so that's why I'm using the alpha over node there. And yeah, so it's just really subtle blurring just behind it, just right there. So I think that looks, it's looking pretty good actually. Okay, so now I'm going to combine those two together. So let's just drop this in right there. Okay. Alright, looking good. Awesome. Alright, now there's one final thing that we're going to do, and this is really important because currently you'll notice that although it looks quite realistic, some of the textures are looking a little bit bland, a little bit blurry, and not very, sharp or realistic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in here a filter node, set it to sharpen, and I'm just going to plug it in wherever wherever it's using it, so like there. And I'm going to set the factor amount to a 0.1. Okay, awesome. So this is what it looks like without the sharpen node. Set it to 0. And then this is what it looks like with the sharpen node. Okay, so it just slightly, very slightly, just sharpens up those textures and just gives it a nicer, a cooler looking result. And the other thing you can also do as well as that is also go into the texture settings. So if you go here, underneath the image sampling, you can actually turn the filter size down to 1. You can do that for all of them actually. Actually, let's just do that. I don't think I did that for my final one, but it does give you sharper textures, but it can result in more flickering if you use it for an animation, so just be aware of that. Let's just do that, see how it looks. Filter size, set it to 0.1, and I'll also do it for the clouds as well, just because. Okay, so that should, yeah, it gives you more, yeah, just better looking, sharper looking textures. But yeah, it doesn't work so well with animations because it does result in flickering. That's why it filters it, like it blurs the textures a little bit, so that when the camera moves, you don't get flickering. So it's like a smoother kind of look. But yeah, if it's a still image, you can get away with just using a filter size of 0.1. Anyway, that's about it, guys. That's how to create the world in Blender. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. As always, I'm looking forward to seeing what you create with it. So if you create a cool animation of an asteroid crashing into the world, or like a space battle, or something else cool, by all means, shoot me a link to it or put it in the comments below. And yeah, thanks for watching. This, as I explained at the beginning, was going to be part of the Nature Academy. The Nature Academy is actually going to be coming out in about 1 month from now. It's all about how to create nature, so things on Earth, like trees and forests and oceans and lakes and flowers and things like that. So that's all going to be coming out in a month. If you're part of my email subscriber list, you'll probably be hearing about that a lot. And but yeah, otherwise, thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll speak to you next time.